Let's now focus on John Crowe Ransom. Born in 1888 and passing in 1974, often called the architect of New Criticism, Ransom was an American literary critic, poet, essayist, and editor, and he is widely regarded as one of the founding figures of the New Criticism school. Serving as a faculty member at Kenyon College, he became the first editor of the influential Kenyon Review, a journal that played a central role in promoting new critical ideas. The movement itself took its name from his landmark 1941 volume, The New Criticism, in which he praised I.A. Richards, William Emerson, and T.S. Eliot for their contributions to a text-centered critical methodology. But the groundwork had been laid earlier. In his 1937 essay Criticism Incorporated, Ransom articulated his belief that literary criticism must be, as he put it, more scientific or precise and systematic, and that poems should be approached as aesthetic objects independent of historical or biographical influences. His advocacy of close reading deeply influenced a generation of students, including Alan Tate, Cleanth Brooks, and Robert Penn Warren, all of whom would go on to expand and refine new critical principles. Among his major works, The World's Body, published in 1938, stands out as a collection of essays exploring the form and essence of poetic language, blending close analysis with philosophical reflection on the nature of art. His most influential work, The New Criticism, published in 1941, not only gave the movement its name, but firmly established its key doctrines, textual autonomy, rigorous close reading, and the treatment of literature as a self-contained aesthetic object. Later in his career, Ransom turned to questions of faith and tradition in God Without Thunder, an unorthodox defense of orthodoxy, published in 1965, offering a nuanced critique of secularism while defending spiritual orthodoxy through unconventional arguments. Together, these works reveal Ransom's range from formalist precision to philosophical inquiry and cement his place as a central figure in modern literary criticism. Ultimately, John Crowe Ransom's legacy lies in formalizing a critical approach that redefined mid-20th century literary scholarship, ensuring that close reading became a foundational skill for generations of students and scholars alike. Let's now turn to I.A. Richards, born in 1893 and passing in 1979, a foundational thinker of modern literary criticism. Ivor Armstrong Richards was an English educator and critic whose pioneering work laid the groundwork for the movement we call New Criticism. Even though he is not formally placed alongside John Crowe Ransom, Cleanth Brooks, Robert Penn Warren, or Alan Tate, Richards was renowned for his conviction that the two pillars upon which a theory of criticism must rest are an account of value and an account of communication. He sought to approach the study of literary interpretation with the same precision as a science. His major works include Science and Poetry, published in 1926, and The Philosophy of Rhetoric, published in 1936, texts that explored the very nature of poetic language, communication, and aesthetic value. In The Philosophy of Rhetoric, Richards introduced one of the most influential distinctions in modern criticism, the terms tenor and vehicle in the study of metaphor. His belief was that by examining the interplay between tenor, the underlying idea, and vehicle, the image or figure used to convey it, we could better understand the power and subtlety of figurative language. Richards championed close reading, treating literature as a self-contained aesthetic object. He examined how readers interact with text, identifying 4 essential factors that determine a word's total meaning: sense, feeling, tone, and intention. This framework invited readers to dissect the mechanics of meaning while still respecting literature's artistic integrity. Often referred to as the father of New Criticism, Richards' systematic, reader-focused approach reshaped the landscape of literary studies in the 20th century. His fusion of rigorous analysis with an understanding of reader psychology not only revolutionized how we interpret literature, but also set the stage for generations of formalist critics to come. Let's turn to the remarkable collaborations between I.A. Richards and Charles K. Ogden, a linguist, philosopher, and writer, whose partnership with Richards produced some of the most influential interdisciplinary works of the early 20th century. Their first major joint publication was Foundations of Aesthetics in 1922. Here, Richards and Ogden set out the principles of aesthetic reception, developing a literary theory of harmony as the foundation for evaluating art and literature. This work was a decisive attempt to systematize how beauty and meaning operate in the reader's mind. Just 1 year later, in 1923, they released their landmark study, The Meaning of Meaning, a study of the influence of language upon thought and of the science of symbolism. This book bridged language, psychology, and philosophy, offering a groundbreaking exploration of how words shape human thought. The text was not merely about semantics, it was about the deep relationship between linguistic symbols and mental life, making it a cornerstone for both literary theory and communication studies. In 1930, Richards and Ogden moved from theory to practical application with Basic English, a general introduction with rules and grammar. This text outlined a simplified version of English built on an 850-word core vocabulary. The aim was ambitious: to create a universally accessible form of English for international communication. Their vision expanded further in the Times of India Guide to Basic English in 1938, where they promoted Basic English as an auxiliary global language intended to make cross-cultural communication more accessible and less prone to misunderstanding. Let's turn to 1924, when I.A. Richards published Principles of Literary Criticism, a work that laid the foundations of modern critical theory. In this book, Richards presented a systematic framework for understanding how the human mind responds to literature, paying particular attention to rhythm and meter. His approach was both organic and contextual. He emphasized that the sound effects of prosody have only limited psychological impact when taken in isolation, without meaning or context to support them. Richards explored core elements of literary analysis such as form, value, rhythm, literary infectiousness, allusiveness, divergent readings, and the role of belief in interpretation. He argued that the worth of literature lies in its power to organize and harmonize our mental life rather than serving any external moral or utilitarian purpose. One of his most memorable remarks captures this perfectly. A book is a machine to think with, but it need not, therefore, usurp the functions of the bellows or the locomotive. In other words, literature is an instrument for intellectual and emotional engagement, not a tool for material ends. Let's now turn to Practical Criticism. Published in 1929 by I.A. Richards, one of the most important foundations of modern close reading. In this work, Richards set out to conduct what he called an empirical study of how readers actually respond to literature, with a particular interest in what he termed inferior responses to a text. He defined practical criticism as the close reading of poems without reference to context, history, or authorial biography, seeking to isolate the reader's direct encounter with the words on the page. While teaching at Cambridge University, Richards devised what became a famous experiment. He selected 13 poems, stripped away all details about the author or historical background, and presented them to his undergraduate students. He then asked them to write their interpretations. The results were striking. He discovered a remarkable variety of responses, many of which revealed serious misreadings. This experiment, while entertaining in parts, underscored a vital point. The dangers of misinterpretation are always present when readers bring unchecked assumptions into the reading process. Through this work, Richards developed a set of critical tools and concepts that would shape the methodology of close reading. These included his theories of metaphor, value, tone, stock response, incipient action, pseudo-statement, and ambiguity. Perhaps most influential was his articulation of the 4 kinds of meaning that operate in any literary text. The first one is sense, the basic conceptual meaning of the words. The second one is tone, the author's or speaker's attitude toward the audience. Third, feeling, the emotional coloring of the language. Fourth, Intention. The purpose that unites sense, tone, and feeling into a coherent whole. These categories became central to close reading pedagogy and remain widely referenced today. In the end, practical criticism was more than an experiment. It was a cornerstone for the new critical emphasis on textual autonomy and analytical precision.